Président Laurent Fabius coming on stage. He serves as the president of the Constitutional Council in France since 2016. He previously served as Prime Minister of France from 1984 to 1986. And he was 37 years old when he was appointed, and this is the second youngest Prime Minister of the Fifth Republic. He's known as the father of the Paris Agreement. Many of you may have seen his picture gaveling the result of the Paris Agreement. And he's been pushing for future generations for long before many knew that it was a thing. So please welcome on stage Président Laurent Fabius. Welcome to our stage. So, future generations is a new concept for some of us, but it's been present throughout your whole career. How did this idea come to be for you?
I don't know. I don't know, but it's a fact that in my different positions, I've always thought about the future. And at the same time, I'm very much interested by not only the aim, but the way to go to the future. Because if you put an aim in the long term, in the long distance, but if you don't control the way, you are not in the market. Okay, and when I was young, a few months ago, I read a sentence by Winston Churchill, and I want to tell it to you. Churchill said, "The difference between a politician and a statesman is that a politician thinks about the next elections, while the statesman thinks about the next generation." And I think it makes sense, particularly today. Therefore, it is true that, and especially in this changing world, we have to take care about the present situation, but also have always a very close look to future generations. That's my story.
Mm-hmm. And part of your story is COP21, right, in Paris?
Yeah.
You were already thinking about future generations back then. How did that link to the Paris Agreement?
In fact, the concept of future generation is present in the preamble of Paris Agreement. There are people here who have been with me in order to build this success, because Paris, it was 9 years ago, yes. It is the first worldwide agreement about climate change. In fact, we are not sure that it would be a success. It was quite a challenge. And it has been a success because we have been able, at that time, 2015, to bring together three different words. First, science. It's science and innovation. Second, civil society. ChangeNOW is dealing with civil society. And three, the government. The international situation was much better than today. And therefore, we were able, and it was especially my role as the president of the COP, to build together the different countries all around the world, and especially China, US, Europe, India. And we are not sure that it would be a success till the end. The end of COP21 in Paris was a Saturday afternoon. And Saturday morning, I was not sure that it would be a success. But at the end of the day, it was a success. And it's fascinating because today, Paris COP21 is considered as really the basis of everything when you speak about fighting against climate change. But the actors themselves, not all of them were aware of this. I remember, and I must say that in a very low voice, that many of them were considering that the agreement that they are signing at that time will have no legal consequence. And today, as a matter of fact, it is the basis of our action. Therefore, always keep in mind that we have to take decisions for the time being, but always having in mind the next generation, the future generations.
You were talking about science, the Paris Agreement, and I think young people are some of the biggest advocates for looking at science and looking at what's really happening to our world. And we're always telling leaders to stop gambling with our future. So how do you think leaders can act, considering future generations and this demand that young people have?
First, they have to ask young people to participate in their decisions, which means that leaders, and especially politicians, have not to be arrogant and to consider that because you are young, you don't know things. No. A few minutes ago, we had a gentleman who is 14.
Yeah.
Understand? Okay. Well, he's a bit old, but he has started when he was very young. And it's amazing because he has an experience, he has a way to explain things. Therefore, I think your question was about governments all around the world. Governments have to be particularly keen to what the young people are saying. It doesn't mean that it is always right, but it is always meaningful. And you have to have your eyes and your ears open.
So we've talked about young people, we've talked about politicians, but I know you also have a background in law. So can you explain the growing use of future generations before national, regional, and even global courts, especially in litigation and other documents?
Well, that's a new thing. You know, today I'm the Chief Justice, the President of our Supreme Court. And before, well, I was in government and in National Assembly. But it is true that you have a new phenomenon throughout the world, probably because people have not been satisfied by the decisions of governments, and especially in the field of climate change. And therefore, more and more, you have cases coming to the courts. Recently, it was in February, in my court, we had a worldwide meeting with about 100 judges coming from every part of the world. And we discussed about this concept of future generation. And it was really striking because most of us now are dealing with and acting with these new concepts. It is true in France, but it is true in Germany, it is true in Netherlands, it is true in Latin America, it is true in China, it is true in India. And why? Because people have been disillusioned by the fact that there were, and there are menaces against our nature, and the answers are not enough. And therefore, naturally, they come to a court. It doesn't mean that they have always successes in the court, but the fact that they are making a plea, it makes people more aware of the phenomenon, and very often they are successful. And more and more, the decisions which are taken by the courts have an influence on the reality of our society. As you may know, in a few days, the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg will take a decision, I don't know what will be the decision, about an important case which is put by young Portuguese. In my court in France, we have taken recently in 2023 a very important decision about how to deal with nuclear waste. And we decided, and there is a special sentence, that the decisions which are to be taken by governments and by bodies, different bodies, must not only take into consideration the present aspect of a situation, but also the interest of future generations. And this way of thinking is gaining ground everywhere, and it has concrete impacts, because when a judge has decided something, people and companies have to abide by the decision.
And I know you hosted 100 judges, I believe, from different regions and legal systems to reflect on justice, future generations, and the environment just now in February. They were under Chatham House rules, I understand, but I know there's different ways to implement thoughts on future generations depending on countries and context. Is there anything you can share about that gathering with us?
Yeah, it was very interesting because the judges were coming from all around the world. The first thing is what I was saying a few minutes ago, is that in nearly every court there is this growing number of cases about climate, and the feeling that more and more the judge is not only a judge for the present and the past, but also a judge taking into consideration the future. Now, in this meeting, there are at least 2 or 3 things that were very important for me. First, this concept of future generations is not new to legal text. It is present in the United Nations Charter. It is present in the Rio Declaration, in the Rome Statute, in the Paris Agreement. And at a national level, this concept of future generation is enshrined in half of the world's constitution. It means that it is a very, very important factor. Second, obviously, civil society has a key role to play. And I want to pay tribute, and especially in ChangeNOW, to the role of civil society and to the role of science as well. And this meeting of 100 judges pays really a tribute to civil society as well. And third, because we were between judges, we were aware that future generations raise several legal questions. First, who can defend future generations that do not yet exist? Anyone at all? You can imagine the possible excesses. Dedicated defender, non-governmental organizations, Aboriginal people. In fact, young people are the most active players in defending the future, and particularly because they know or feel that their own future is under threat, and that they will suffer negative consequences of current action or inaction. But this issue of access to the courts raises also, and we were aware of that in our meeting, the very sensitive question of judges' legitimacy at a time when many people are talking about the threat, you have heard that, of a government of judges. My belief is that judges, when they use the concept of future generations, and they are doing it more and more, are simply applying and interpreting current law to the specific context they are faced on. Therefore, I think that judges are not governments, they are not civil society, they have to stay in their own competence, but everybody must be struck by the fact that in this field of fighting against climate change, they are taking more and more importance.
And we've been talking about judges, government. We could talk about the UN. I realized when I came on stage, I said I was Inés. No one actually knows where I work or what I do. So I'm currently the Next Generation Fellow at the UN Foundation. And what we're doing is trying to influence also and support the UN and the work that they're doing towards the Summit of the Future. What would you like to see reflected in the Declaration of Future Generation that's coming up in September? And why should people care about these kinds of processes too?
You mean the UN?
Yes, Summit of the Future in September.
Well, I think, well, it will depend on the general situation around the world, because UN is not apart from the international situation, and I don't want to comment on politics because it's forbidden for me. But obviously, according to the result of the American election, things can be different. Okay, everybody understand. Okay, but, and we know that it's not easy to have a strong UN resolution. But I am confident, and I am particularly interested in this meeting. Why? Because it is important to set a common framework for decision makers. Obviously, there will be resistance, but I think the Summit of the Future, because its title, will be a good opportunity to bring together world leaders to forge a new international consensus on how we can deliver a better present and secure a better future. And I hope that it will be an opportunity to demonstrate that international cooperation can address current challenges. In particular, I will add two comments. First, there is obviously a deficit towards a deficit of trust coming from the most vulnerable countries, and especially in the field of environment. And I hope that this pact, which will stem from the UN, could help to fight this deficit. And I will add that, and it's a more general thought, I hope that you will share this thought, that when we think about the major challenges of our time, and in particular the environment, all these challenges have a threefold characteristic. First, the main challenges are interdisciplinary. Second, they are international. And third, they are intergenerational. And therefore, the hope that the pact, the future pact, will be interdisciplinary, addressing not only climate and biodiversity, but also interrelated issues such as gender, peace, science, and technology. I think it is a step in the good direction. Therefore, I know that it is difficult, but I hope that it will be an element to go in the right direction.
And you spoke about trust, and I see the time is running out, but I do want to ask you a final question, because I think these kinds of conversations do generate trust. So I want to thank you for being a good ancestor for our future generations, but also ask you, how can we all be good ancestors for those that are to come?
Well, you know, I know that I'm not very young, but ancestor, it's the first time that
I'm an ancestor too, don't worry.
Okay. Maybe father of the Paris Agreement, okay. No, I will end by an anecdote. I had a conversation with Michael Bloomberg, okay, the previous, the former mayor of New York, and at the moment of Paris Agreement. And Michael Bloomberg said to me, well, Mr. Fabius, wish a good success, but be careful. There are two mistakes to avoid, okay? The first one, well, is to have a short-sighted view. You must have a long-sighted view, but you must avoid, when you are discussing about the future, to speak in a way that people think that there is nothing to do today, because it's it's overturned. And I think it's right. And one of the difficulties in UN and in ChangeNOW and in all our action is to have a good balance between a necessity of long-term view, but also a short-term action. That's the first advice of Bloomberg, and I think it's right. The second one is about optimism and pessimism. Okay, let's be blunt. The situation of climate is not a good one. We're off track. Without Paris, I don't know if you know that, without Paris Agreement, the trend will be 5 degrees. 5 degrees. And today we are about 3 degrees. Okay, 4 in France because of its geographical situation. But it's too much. It's too much. It's already very difficult with 1.5, 1.6, 1.8. What about if it is 4 degrees? And therefore, there are elements of pessimism. But if you are pessimistic, people say, okay, there's nothing to do. I put on the TV and that's all. No, it's not the way it can go. We must be lucid, but we must keep optimism, because through civil society, through science, and through, hopefully, governments, we can change things. And I think the two advisors of Bloomberg were right. First, have a balance between long-term and short-term action, and second, never abandon optimism. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, President Laurent Fabius. It's been great to share this stage with you.
Thank you, dear. Thank you.
And thanks to all of you who joined us today. I hope that you will take action in your communities wherever you